Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Stephen Thompson. I'm the Community and Events Manager at the Data Lab. Thanks for joining us this afternoon for another Data Lab community webinar. It's been a couple of months since we've done a webinar, so it's nice to be back. Thanks all for joining. For those of you who might not be familiar with the Data Lab community, we're an online community with over 8,000 data and AI professionals, students, academics, researchers, and just generally anybody who's interested in keeping up to date with what's going on in data and AI. We run regular events like this one today. We also do in-person meetups. We've got a mentorship scheme, which is totally free to use. We've got a jobs board, and we've also got lots of discussion groups and forums where you can join in conversations and kind of get a bit of support or just generally keep up to date with what's going on. If you're not already a member of the community, you can join for free by scanning the QR code, which should be on the bottom right of your screen at the moment. Otherwise, I'll pop a link to the page in the chat afterwards. Throughout April in the community, our theme is open data, and today is the first in a series of webinars and events that we've got lined up over the next few weeks, where we'll be discussing the value, the impact of open data, as well as some of the challenges in a changing technological landscape. The topic for today's session is architecting the future of national open data. And in a second, I'll hand you over to our guest speaker, Professor Elena Simperl. The format for today's session is we'll have around about 30 to 40 minutes presentation from Elena, and then we'll have time afterwards for Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A, which should be along the bottom of your Zoom screen at the moment. If any questions come up, please pop them in there as they occur to you. You don't have to save them until the end, just pop them in, and then we'll get to those, and we'll try and get through as many of those at the end as we can. So on to today's session. The traditional open data portal has often been criticised as a data graveyard. It can be full of fragmented files that are technically open, but are hard to find and sometimes even harder to use. As countries build out their AI capabilities, open data is shifting from a transparency exercise to something more fundamental, which is the foundations for national sovereign AI. In today's session, Elena Simperl, who's a professor at King's College London and also the Director of Research at the Open Data Institute, will share a practical blueprint for how large language models can help solve two long-standing challenges, which are publishing data with less friction and also enabling meaningful discovery. She'll also introduce the idea of AI readiness and show how her team applied it to the design of a national data library as a high availability AI-ready data product. So Elena, it's great to have you here, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity to present some of the more recent work we have done. I'm just going to make an attempt to share my screen. Okay. All right. Don't worry. So we're gonna give it a go. As I said, I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to present some of the work I've been doing across both my teams at King's College London and the Open Data Institute. So this is a very timely opportunity to speak about open data. Open data has been around for many years, and it has proven times and times again that it can be a vector of growth and innovation. Just to bring everyone on the same page, what I mean by open data is essentially the right-hand side of the ODI's open data spectrum that you can see here on the slide. So it's data that anyone can access, use, and share. So in open data, you don't have limitations on how the data will be used. You could use it for commercial purposes. You could use it in a share-alike fashion. It's not exactly the same as data in the public domain. And I think the final thing that everyone who runs data infrastructure knows is that just because data is free to use, it doesn't mean that the infrastructure to publish, maintain, and access it is free to access or free to run. So there's costs associated with running a successful open data ecosystem. There's many open data sets available online. So the last statistics we have from Google dataset search count more than 45 million such datasets. And while open data has been traditionally associated with the public sector, with government, with science, it is available and successful in many verticals. So at the ODI, we have vertical editions of our open data spectrum in many domains. So it can be agriculture, it can be finance, it can be water, other types of utilities, telecommunications, or conservation projects. The infrastructure underlying such open data ecosystem is varied, right? So I've mentioned Google dataset search, so we have tools to be able to index open data that is published on the web, allowing people to search for it and find it. We have data portals that are stewarded by different institutions, including governments. We have initiatives like the European Data Portal that is essentially providing a one stop to be able to integrate across multiple national and regional data portals. We have infrastructure like linked open data, which allows one to query information that is available across many different sites. And now with the rise of AI, we have a growing number of data sets available in AI native, machine learning native data formats on public platforms such as Hugging Face. And yet, despite millions of such datasets available in a range of domains and for a variety of use cases, this data is not as useful and as usable as it could be. As you can see in the chart on the left-hand side from the World Economic Forum, various data usability and access issues are still remain in industry and hinder progress. There's also concerns around data divide and data literacy, which mean that companies and organizations are not as effective as they could be, both at how they operate and how they go about their business. And things are changing. So with the rise of large language models and AI agents, the open data ecosystem has changed dramatically over the past 3 years. Longpre and colleagues in 2024 have shown that a wide range of open and public data sources have restricted access because of various fears of how their data is used and reused, sometimes violating the terms of use of this data by various parties. The types of practices that we see in this new brave world, including very aggressive data scraping and attempts to use and access public infrastructure, mean that initiatives like Wikimedia, which provide access to information for all, have raised serious concerns about their ability to continue to maintain this infrastructure, given this aggressive practices that we see in the AI space, which have prompted some experts to worry whether we are entering an open data winter. So against this background, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of some of the work that me and my team have been doing that is pertaining to the open data ecosystem. So I'm a computer scientist. I have a background in AI, and I've been working at the intersection of a data policy and user research and user experience with data for almost 2 decades. So some of the prior work, I'm going to just briefly go through it through right now. will show you something about the project we've done in improving how people find data sets, in understanding how to make the experience of finding and using data more effective, and then moving on to other areas like open government data portals and data storytelling. Over the years, we have worked with data portals to build algorithms, information retrieval algorithms that lead to more accurate results when someone is querying for a data set to meet their needs. But also we have worked with users of data to understand what it would take for them to have a better, more effective portal experience. This is work that is broadly termed as human data interaction. So we've run many user studies with professionals who are working with data in their roles. We have tried to articulate how various recommendations, for instance, around the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability of data translate in practices and in specific designs of portals that do lead to better user engagement, more data downloads, and in general, a better user experience. We have applied this research and learning to open government data portals. In particularly, my team has been working with the European data portal, which I have mentioned earlier, and we have provided guidance for national and regional portals to design their data infrastructure in a user-centric way. This has resulted in resources like this one, which is our user-centric open data publishing toolkit, which is also used by the Open Data Institute. Now, some of the ongoing work. All of this ongoing work, as Stephen was saying in the introduction, is prompted and using generative AI and the latest AI capabilities we have seen entering the mainstream in the last 2 to 3 years, as not just as an opportunity perhaps to rethink data experiences with open data and open data portals, but also to try to understand how data that has been historically or traditionally published in this form using portals would need to be made available so that chatbots and other types of emerging AI products will be able to make use of this data to deliver value to their customers. A few years ago, so 2023, we have started running a series of workshops with people who were now exploring how general chatbots like Claude, ChatGPT, or Copilot could potentially be used as data discovery tools. So if in the past people would perhaps use a regular search engine like Google, or would visit a website like the website of the Office of National Statistics, or a data portal like data.uk to find their data, we have embarked in 2023 on a project called Data Prompting, where we try to understand, could chatbots and conversational interfaces be a way for more people, including those who perhaps don't have that technical data background that most portals assume. Could this be a way for them to engage with the data ecosystem and find and make sense of the data they need? Some of this work was also carried out with colleagues from Microsoft, and we, as part of this, we have produced a number of research reports. The first one was really an overview of the varied ways in which generative AI could potentially help with data publishing and use, as well as insights from these workshops that I've been mentioning around how people go about to prompt, to ask chatbots queries about data, whether to find a specific data set or to query specific statistics or metadata about this data set, or really to do something with this data set like generate code to create a visualization. And across these many workshops we have been running in different countries, we've also started to codify what we have seen. So one of the outputs we have produced is a typology of different data experiences. So the types of queries, of behaviors we have seen data users showing when they are using chatbots as a way to discover data sets. So broadly speaking, across these many different sessions in multiple countries and domains, we have seen people either requesting a specific data set, even naming that data set and asking the chatbot to retrieve it. We have seen people describing what they are actually looking for. So they don't actually know whether that data set exists, and they don't know the name or the name of the institution publishing it. But the query mentions something like data or synonyms as well as specific attributes. And then finally, there's more implied types of requests where the user typically is looking for an answer that, or for some information that could be answered by processing an existing data set. So we have taken this extensive user research and we have started thinking about how we could improve people's experiences on existing data portals. So on the right-hand side is just the AI-generated interface of how such a conversational data finder tool could look like, because all of us who have tried to use portals or are using portals know that we do struggle to find the data sets we need. And that's mostly because dataset search as it is implemented today relies a lot on metadata. That metadata is not as complete and as of high quality as we would wish for. So one of the things we've been working on, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, is how we could perhaps improve that metadata to lead to better search. But beyond that, this type of generative AI capabilities and conversational capabilities give us a chance to think about moving away from how we search for data sets right now, so through keywords, through facets, and think about natural language, so free text queries and conversations. And some of the research we've been doing, which I won't have time, unfortunately, to include in the deck today, is trying to answer this question. So could we, with the current foundational AI models that are available, could we build better conversational data tools? And one of the results really, and the things that we would like to collaborate with the community on, is to build these types of systems, but also to build the benchmarks that we need, realistic, useful benchmarks, to be able to check whether what is available on the market in terms of foundational models could really provide solid foundations for data portals to implement better conversational capabilities. But today I'm going to focus on improving search infrastructure, dataset search infrastructures. These are two papers that we have published recently in my team at King's, and I will share the slides if people want to look them up. So in one study we have looked at improving dataset search on current portals by essentially creating LLM-generated descriptions from the metadata that is available, as well as samples of the datasets published on those portals. So, and the questions we were asking were which of these LLM augmented descriptions or information are most useful for search performance. So we've compared different types of metadata. We've looked at topics, we've looked at keywords, we've looked at descriptions, and across multiple types of large language models and architecture configurations, we've seen that descriptions are probably the most effective metadata to support natural language queries, improving retrieval by around 20% compared to the metadata that is currently available on portals. And we've done that across the three types of conversational queries that have emerged from our user research, which I had mentioned earlier. Then we thought, well, actually, so now we know that descriptions are really, really important. How could we actually complement some of that publisher created metadata? And we've used large language models for that as well. And we've essentially built this LLM-based tool for metadata augmentation, trying different settings to create the metadata based on the title of the dataset, which is typically available, a title and the schema. So the headers in a spreadsheet could be that schema, as well as a title, a schema, and some example, some rows from the dataset. And then we've evaluated this comprehensively, both in an automatic way using an approach called LLM as a judge, where you essentially take a separate large language model to evaluate the performance of your LLM metadata generator, as well as a qualitative evaluation with human input. And we were able basically to show several things. Some interesting effects on adding schema information to titles, resulting in a degradation of the metadata performance. So if you're trying to do this on your portal, or if you're trying to do this when you publish your metadata, then it's worth actually testing with these different settings to make sure that we're using the LLMs in the best way possible. So adding schema information to the title does not necessarily lead in better performance. At the same time, some examples or some rows, for instance, from a spreadsheet can have better effects, and the performance really varies across multiple large language models. So you could see this also on the visualization and in the examples on the right-hand side. But essentially, the message here is, do try different LLMs. Be aware of the fact that adding more information in that context that you give to the LLM to generate the metadata may not really result in better performance, and just pick the one that is best for you and the type of metadata and levels of metadata quality that you have. I'm just going to have a look at the time. Okay, right. So for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to go back to some of the work that we're doing in my team here at the Open Data Institute. And this is going to be focusing on open government data specifically. So at the ODI, in the data-centric AI program, which I am leading, we're working towards designing key components of national data infrastructure, but we're also offering actionable guidance to data holders and publishers to make the most of AI capabilities. So the first project I'm going to tell you about was also mentioned in the introduction, is some work we've released, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, which is called NDL Lite. NDL stands for the National Data Library, which is a government initiative that was announced in the Labour Manifesto before the latest elections. And since then, there's been a lot of discussion, basically, of what this National Data Library could or could not be, including mentioning it in the AI Action and Opportunities Plan. So at the ODI, we set out to build or to experiment with an infrastructure, an AI infrastructure, using open source capabilities to show how you could build such a nationwide, responsibly curated data asset. And when we did that, so we did that based on some of the thinking we've been doing since 2024, which was summarized in a paper here on the right-hand side that was published in the UK National Data Library Technical White Paper Challenge that was run by Wellcome. So the project that NDL Lite basically wanted to create this AI-ready data asset, lifting from existing UK government and public sources Obviously, we were aware, as the title says, that this is just the first step. So we wanted to have something extensible that other people can reuse based on documentation. AI ready by design, so useful and usable by AI engineers, but also by AI tools such as AI agents. So we went about it in the classical sort of data science way. We've curated the data sets, we've processed them, and then we've thought about how we could make it as useful as possible for AI use cases. So this was a relatively short project of around 4 months, which costed us in the range of £20,000. We had an AI engineer, a researcher, the project sponsor, which was myself, and help from a policy colleague as well. So in terms of curations, we have more than 100,000 files from these 6 government data sources. Some of them are text data, some of them are a bit more structured, like for instance, CSV files. Processing, we essentially had to clean some of the data to make sure on the one hand side that we don't have personally identifiable information, but also did remove some of the most obvious noise in the data. We've had to apply some OCR. We had to structure the data and to convert it to Parquet, which is a machine learning technical format. We've enriched the data set with metadata as well as with AI native metadata using a vocabulary called croissant. And then we've created an embedding representation, so an AI representation in a vector database to enable search. In terms of AI readiness of the dataset, we wanted to have an API access, an API endpoint, but also we thought about access by AI agents through a protocol called the Model Context Protocol, and we've made everything available on Hugging Face, which is a platform that many AI engineers are using. And if you want to know how to use this is just a few screenshots of the agent we've been building, basically. So here you see someone looking for some data to build a data story about UK trade. It says search for data and trade services with some additional specification, produce a graph showing the data to support a certain narrative. So with the AI agent that we have and with the data formats and means of access that we are supporting, this can be created quite easily. Those of you interested in architectures, this is for you here. And there's also a link in the slides that I will share to the GitHub repository where you can find the dataset and documentation and all the code. So what we wanted what we could show in this project is that it's really not that difficult to get started with such a nationwide resource. So we worked with limited resources and with established methodologies, with open source infrastructure and tools. We've also noticed when we were experimenting with the AI agent I mentioned earlier that public sector data repositories will, in their current format hold national data library back if they're not AI ready. More about AI readiness in a second. And we have in the report that we have published to NDL Lite also made a number of observations about the impact of the quality of the data currently available and agentic AI behavior. So I've already talked about AI readiness a little bit. AI ready data was a project that the ODI has started 18 months ago. And essentially it means that your data in your data portal or elsewhere must be published in an appropriate standardized format, including native AI formats, so that AI crawlers are able to index the data. LLMs are really drawing on that data to answer questions, and AI agents access the data without any friction. And there's many different ways this could play out at web scale, and different technology companies are currently promoting different architectures. AI readiness is really a problem. So I have mentioned that issue of data access to the shrinking data commons in my introduction. In the same study, as well as in the data provenance initiative work that colleagues at MIT and elsewhere have done in the last 3 years, they have also shown that licenses are often mislabeled, which means that that fear and behavior, that restrictive behavior that we see from publishers in response to data scraping is exacerbated. There's also studies that have shown that data quality as such is worsening. So this gives a higher sense of urgency to this question of AI readiness. So at the ODI, we've been working on practical recommendations for data holders and publishers as part of our AI Ready framework, which is here on the left-hand side, which has been applied and reused in a number of other contexts, among others by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology in their guidance for AI-ready data for government data from January this year, as well as by the Big Data Value Association in Europe. I'm just going to skip through the 4 areas of the framework really quickly because we don't have a lot of time. But essentially, say the recommendations we have for data holders and publishers fall into 4 categories: the properties about the data, so what do we want to see from the data itself, what information about the data should metadata tell us, and how specifically for AI use cases do we need to think about updating or changing the surrounding data infrastructure to respond better to AI use cases and agentic data consumption patterns? And then what do we need to do about the governance of the data to respond to specific challenges flagged by AI use cases, as well as by agentic scenarios that, for instance, would prompt us to think about automatic support for some data access and governance policies with technologies and approaches such as policy as code, as well as automated approaches to define data rights and manage access. Okay, so just looking at the time, I think I'm going to spend the remaining 5 minutes or so talking about the last piece of work we have published 3 months ago. So this is less about building that infrastructure and more about thinking about AI-enabled public services and how they allow us as citizens to still have access to accurate information about public services. According to some statistics, 73% of people living in the UK have used some sort of chatbot in their day-to-day life in the past months. So that raised the question for us at the ODI: what happens when people are using chatbots and generative AI tools to inform themselves about public services? We call this citizen queries. Citizen queries are varied, so there's many examples here on the slide. So it can be anything from public health to finding activities or communities to join in the area where I live, to questions about benefits, to questions about renewing driving licenses, applying for apprenticeships, public services like waste collection, and getting advice on specific issues. So these types of queries can cover a really wide range of topics. They can be general queries, like an overview of different benefit schemes, or they can be specific to the context of an individual, so requiring sharing personal information. They can have a time-sensitive component, and require not just truthful answers pertaining to government services and activities, but also they need to be available in an easily understandable way, and recognize the fact that they could contain sensitive information as well. And that is an area where chatbots can help with, because they have that strong general knowledge. They have a way to speak and communicate in multiple languages 24 hours a day, are very fast, can personalize responses, and so on. But we also know from our experiences with them that they can make things up, confidently. There's questions around how up-to-date that information is. Often, not only that they don't refuse to answer certain questions they're not certain of, but they tend to make things up, and they can't really tell you where that information comes from or guide you to the government service or advice site where you could actually deal with the problem that you have. So what we did is we created the so-called AI benchmark. So this is a data set with various citizen queries. So for each of these queries, we generated and tested the correct answer from government sources. And then we took 10 large language models, which typically you will find in every chatbot. We've taken some small ones, some big ones, some open source, some proprietary ones, and checked whether they answer these questions well. So this is an example of how the data in the Citizen Query UK benchmark looks like. There's more than 22,000 questions across a number of different topics. Then to see whether large language models can answer these questions well, we have looked at how accurate their answers are. We have looked at whether they ever refuse to answer queries when they don't really have the correct information, how verbose their answers are, and what happens if we actually nudge them to be brief. Because one thing that we are used to from interacting with government services, with good digital government services, is that there is a strong emphasis on providing to the point, useful, clear, concise information. So for each of these questions, we essentially operationalize them in things in metrics we can measure, and we've looked at the distance between what the answer was that the 10 LLMs provided and the answer from our dataset from gov.uk. This is just for those of you who are interested in how LLM evaluations look like. So we've tried two different settings, one called zero shot, where we use only the general knowledge that the chatbot already has, versus something called few shot, where we give some examples of how good answers look like. And the findings were that performance can be very good, but actually what's worrying is the varying quality, which is very difficult to predict. And there is a long tail of more specialized queries, which cannot be answered well. Also worrying is that chatbots hardly ever refuse to answer a question, and the answers are lengthy and much more verbose than what we are used to from sites like government.uk. And any attempt we have made to try to improve that will often reduce the accuracy of the information that is provided. More encouragingly, both open source and small models can be very, very competitive. So, and I'm going to close with just a pointer to some of the infrastructure projects we have at the ODI. So we do all this work that we have presented here today, which is about building dataset and evaluation protocols, but we're also investing in key components of the public data infrastructure for AI, whether that's data standards that are AI ready or foundational infrastructure like metadata standards. So a project like this, Croissant, which is stewarded by the ML Commons Association, brings together more than 30 organizations to define a metadata standard, machine-readable vocabulary that describes important information about datasets, machine learning datasets, that allows one to ensure data portability between different machine learning tools, hence reducing friction in reuse, making it easier to publish, discover, and reuse machine learning datasets by developers, by search engines, but also by AI agents, and operationalize responsible data practices, for instance, that governance policy as code approach that I have mentioned earlier. More than 800,000 datasets online use this Croissant vocabulary, and that includes sites like Google Dataset Search, Kaggle, OpenML, Hugging Face, Dataverse, tools like TensorFlow, data publishing platforms like CCAN and Dataverse, and many others. And with that, I'm going to wrap up by saying that with all these examples, I hope I was able to show that open data infrastructure remains an essential source of innovation, of growth. There are new and interesting, exciting capabilities in AI that can improve data publishing and with that data reuse and impact, improving the experience that people have with data portals. At the same time, data publishers and portal managers should think about AI readiness, following some of the guidance we have provided in the AI readiness framework. And that includes national data providers who, in one way or another, are likely to be involved in creating the national data library. When that national data library is built, it's really important to experiment extensively with different foundational models providers to really understand what limitations they have, and to invest in useful user-centric benchmarks that measure AI performance with metrics that really matter to people, to make sure that those AI-enabled public services are useful and trusted. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very much looking forward to continue the conversation and answer your questions.
Right, thank you very much, Elena. That was loads of information there for people to digest, and we've had quite a lot of questions coming in. But just before we get to those, at the end there, you mentioned I think it was around 75% of people in the UK have interacted with the chatbot.
73, yeah.
73%, yeah. Then you also kind of talked about some of the, the hallucinations and potential for the information not to be there's potential for the information not to be 100% accurate. I guess
Yes.
amongst the data community, generally people know that LLMs, you have to kind of scrutinize what comes out of them. But when I think of people like my parents who now use ChatGPT basically for everything, where they would have potentially used Google, do you think there's still a job to be done to educate the general public around how to critically assess what a chatbot tells them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there is a big piece there around understanding limitations. There is probably, many people talk about prompting as a skill. And I agree that at the moment this is a skill, and people sometimes underestimate just how much effort it takes to create good prompts. To the extent that, in some domains, like in creative industries, there's prompt databases where you can request for someone to help you write a prompt, which will be pages and pages long. And when you look at it, it will look nothing like the types of free text queries that we are writing, which are very much simulating human-to-human communication. They are very technical instructions, going over pages and pages of content. But whether in a few years from now we will continue to interact with these tools using prompts as we do today remains to be seen. Having said that, these prompts do have a big impact on the performance and the behavior of chatbots, and more people would need to be aware of that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So yeah, we've had quite a lot of questions coming in now, so I think we'll try to get through as many of them as we can.
Yes.
Before we wrap up. So first one's come in from one of the viewers has asked, for an organization who's looking to make their data more discoverable, what would you say are the quickest wins or the sort of easiest steps that they can take to start that journey?
Yes, so it's a great question. So I would start by pointing to the AI readiness framework that the Open Data Institute has developed, because it has 10 or so specific recommendations. So some of them are about the data itself and the format it needs to be available, and the types of tests and analysis on that data that are useful not just to discover the data, but also to make sure that it is useful in as many contexts as possible. The croissant standard that I have mentioned is a I would say, bulletproof way to make sure that your dataset is indexed by tools like Google Dataset Search, which are supporting Croissant. So if you want to be discovered by those types of tools, which index millions and millions of datasets, that's a really easy way to do it. The other way, if you want the data to be used by machine learning engineers, and if you can publish it, or if you can publish the metadata, then repositories like Hugging Face are probably a good way to go about this as well. And there's a lot of research that has shown that if you add a detailed data card, so a documentation to this data set, as well as a croissant record, which is generated automatically on Hugging Face from the data card, that leads to more engagement, to more downloads, to more positive reviews for that data set, and so on.
Thanks very much. And then on we've got a couple of questions here kind of related to the AI readiness framework that you mentioned. So we've got a question from Sarah's asking, what would the minimum viable AI ready bar be for a public sector data set? And then there's another question related as asked, how much additional work do you think would be required for public sector bodies to make their data AI ready on top of existing methods and standards?
Yes. Okay. So these are very, very good questions, right? So, and part of me wants to resist to come up with different tiers. So one of the founders of the ODI is Tim Berners-Lee, who, among other things, he came up with that 5-star link data scheme that basically said for 1 star you need to do this, for 2 stars you need to do this, and so on. So no one has ever achieved 5 stars, which is fine. But actually, what we've also seen happening in the ecosystem is people or publishers implicitly thinking, okay, so 3 stars is probably good enough, and that's as far as I need to go. So I'm not going to do this just because I think it's really important for each data publisher to think about the use cases and the users that they have and what's most useful to them. But just a few things that would probably make it into this MVP. I would say you try to follow international standards as much as possible in the way you structure your data. Make sure that if you want that data set to be useful for AI, that you think about the different class imbalances or how representative that data is for different types of prediction classes. You shouldn't have any type of personally identifiable information. And you should also be aware of file formats like Parquet and others that machine learning engineers use. Then in terms of metadata, I would say Croissant would be a really, really good starting point. And as I was saying, for Hugging Face, but also available for other settings, there's ways to create a lot of that Croissant AI native metadata automatically or with very little user input. And then thinking about something like a model context protocol endpoint to be able for agents to be able to discover and interact with that data set.
Brilliant, thanks very much. And we've got another question here is asking, given the varying quality of LLM answers, is there a risk that going out of our way to make data AI ready implies that we're encouraging their use when perhaps encouraging people to go direct to gov.uk to find the correct answer might be the better route?
Yeah, so I mean that's very, very valid. And I mean our starting point was the fact that a large proportion of the population is already using these tools. So, of course, going straight to the source would be very, very useful. I mean, many of us have read about what happens to traffic, to internet sites because of the proliferation of zero-click search and generative AI answers. So that is a big problem in general. The fact is, we still need to deal with the fact that people will continue to use these tools and will get more and more used to that type of experience. So even if, say, someone lands on your portal, they will expect sometimes of some type of natural language or speech-based interaction just because they have it elsewhere. So then basically a data portal will have to start thinking about which large language models they want to use internally as a means, for instance, to find a data set, explain a data set, generate a visualization based on a data set, and so on.
Yeah, I guess second time mentioning my parents, but they use chatbots as a kind of default now. So I guess it's
Yeah.
about meeting people where they are, even if potentially the best approach is direct to the source.
Yeah, and also thinking about the fact that people will expect those capabilities on your site as well. And you will be probably, unless you want to train your small model yourself, which you can do and could actually be quite useful for specific tasks. Unless you want to do that, you will still have to get a good understanding of the performance of these foundational capabilities.
Brilliant, thanks very much. So we've got a question from Barney. He's asking, do you think meeting some performance threshold on benchmarks like citizen query could end up becoming a formal requirement for national open data infrastructure?
We would love that. But I should also say that this is a benchmark that is just the first step in the right direction. Yeah. So with it, we wanted to point to the fact that the majority of benchmarks that these capabilities are measured on are artificial, right? So they do not directly relate to problems, information needs that people have. But at the same time, say we would want to see more and more of this user-centric benchmarking being done for different languages, for different types of portals and services, and so on and so forth, right? So I'm not saying take that benchmark specifically, but invest in creating these types of benchmarks more widely, and expect, say, in a procurement process for a provider to have tested their technology against benchmarks like this and report on the results.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got a couple of questions here related to the specific projects that you were working on with your team. So Stelios is asking, was there a problem with different licenses in the National Data Library? For example, Parliament licenses for election data versus ONS data, etc.
So we only took the data sets that we were allowed to use. Yeah. But I don't have statistics in my head about which data sets or how much of the data that we have considered we have left out because of this. I would point people to some work done by a French company called Pleias. Pleias. I'll put it in the chat. So they have looked extensively at this approach of building training data sets for AI across the whole web, while also being very thoughtful about licenses. So they have a much better sample of sites and licenses that they have written about extensively than we in our project. So the company is called Pleias.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I believe also related to the work you've been doing, Deborah Bratt has asked, could you explain broadly how both large language models and human as a judge were integrated into the overall development and evaluation process?
So this is that for citizen query or for the?
Hasn't said specifically, Deborah Bratt, if you could maybe put a little bit more context to your question in the chat.
So I can talk a little bit about citizen query. So in citizen query, we have created, so the data set itself has around 22,000 questions. So each question, there is a prompt, which is basically what the person would type into the chatbot. There is an expected response. Then we've also created something called a persona, which is like saying, I am a 45 years old, I'm a parent with kids in secondary school, etc. And then ask the question, which leads to different answers. See, a lot of the data that we have created in the benchmark is synthetically generated. So we had an initial seed, which was generated by hand by a group of us here at the ODI, as well as our collaborators in the US. We have done that through by consulting with colleagues and partners who are either building data portals or running relevant government projects. So we've done extensive research to get an understanding of how realistic queries and topics and personas look like. And then we have used that to synthetically generate a 22,000 dataset using a open source LLM called Qwen. All the answers came from gov.uk. And then basically for the evaluation, we've defined this factuality and other types of metrics to measure the distance between the generated answer and the answer that we had expected from gov.uk. So that computation was not LLM as a judge, was just a metric basic, was a mathematical function that was looking at words and other things like vectorial numerical representations of the answer expected and generated and producing, computing a number.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Elena. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We've got one last comment from Martin McPhee, who is part of the Scottish Government's open data team. He's mentioning that they have actually achieved 5-star open data in Scotland and are now working to overhaul their data publishing provision to better meet the user needs. And this brings me
great.
Great news. And this brings me nicely onto the kind of wrap up of the session, because next week we'll be running a session with Martin and his team to talk about the new open data platform, which is the 23rd of April at 1 o'clock. And then later this month, we've also got a meetup in Dundee. Speaking about open data, we've got one of your colleagues, Howard Askew. Meetup in Dundee. And then we've also got another webinar at the end of the month, talking a little bit more about AI readiness in open data. But thank you very much, Elena, for joining.
Well, thank you for everyone for the questions. I mean, a lot of stuff to think about for me and the colleagues. And thank you for the invitation. I will share the slides with you if colleagues are interested as well.
Yeah, please. We had a couple of questions asking about the slides, so we can post those. We can send those out. We've recorded as well, so we can send the recording and the slides out afterwards. But thanks everybody for joining, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya. Cheers.